that's the big pitfall, right? Making those opinions part of your personality and your identity. And then once that becomes part of your identity, then you're going to defend that to the death. And
hey, it's Walter here, and you're at the Think Profit podcast, where we're going to help you develop a rock-solid trading confidence and avoid the potentially endless cycle of system switching. Right, Hugh?
That's right. We're going to help you develop a wealth mindset, develop a trading strategy that fits your core personality, and help you overcome the obstacles that stop over 90% of traders.
All right, Hugh, sounds good. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this.
Hey, Hugh, so we have this question from a trader, and the question is, what should I pay attention to if I don't have a model of the world yet, and I want to incorporate some fundamentals into my trading? So do you have any thoughts about how you would go about creating a model of the world if you're using fundamentals?
I think you would start, or at least I would start with work it backwards, like who's successful trading fundamentals, right? And then what are they looking at? And then kind of learn from there and then go from that. I think that a lot of people will try to make a model of the world that they think is right, but it will be way off. It won't approach reality. Like one example I heard was this guy used to be a coffee bean trader. Like he actually physically bought and sold coffee beans. So he knows how to trade the coffee bean futures market because he's really good at that. He knows how the mechanics work on the back end. But if you're just sitting you're at home and you're just looking on Bloomberg or whatever and looking at news about coffee, then what you get from that news can be really skewed in terms of how the mechanics of that market actually works. So I think that would be my place to start if you're going to do fundamentals. Or if you know something, or if you know a lot about a market, let's say that you work in cybersecurity or something, then you might want to look at trades in that market, like stocks or whatever it is, and kind of take it from there. Otherwise, it's such a huge pie that you have to like try to whittle down to a small little trading strategy that I think it's almost impossible to start from the big and go to the small. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I was saying that I mentioned to this trader, I said, well, you kind of, like you said, kind of want to work backwards. So like, for example, some people, what they do is they'll actually plot out the non-farm payroll numbers or the CPI numbers, and they'll sort of superimpose that on the chart of like euro or whatever, the pound or what have you. So they can do that. So that's kind of a way of like turning the fundamental data, the CPI data, for example, into almost like an indicator. And so you can see if there's like, is there any correlation there, or you can run correlations on that. You can also pull the data off of economic calendars. So you go and get the economic calendar historically, pull that data off, and then you, like if you're going to use these data to dictate your positions, you would go back in Forex Tester, take your positions based on where the data drops on the calendar, right? So you're going through like the Excel spreadsheet and then taking these trades and seeing, if you can make it work. It's really hard though to say, I want to trade fundamentals, but I don't have a model of the world. You kind of need to have the model of the world first. Yeah. You might have some ideas, like some very simple ideas like CPI or interest rates or whatever that you think is a really important thing, consumer confidence, whatever you think is the big. Obviously with currencies, it's interest rates are important, elections, jobs, inflation, all of those things are really important. Inflation, because it kind of relates to the interest rates. So all those things are super important. But I mean, the shortcut is what you said. Like, so you might just say, well, Warren Buffett is the guy that I want to follow or whatever. So you would just learn as much as you can, read all the Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger books you can, and then try and figure that out, or find someone else who you think is really good at fundamentals and sort of try and adopt their point of view as well. You could do that. Like I remember the first book I ever read about the markets really was the book by Peter Lynch. He was talking about he would just drive to the malls and see which stores had the most, or drive to stores and see which ones had the full parking lots. There's Bed Bath & Beyond has a bunch of cars there, so I'm going to buy shares in Bed Bath & Beyond. He did things. I don't think it was that simple, but he kind of broke it down that way. And so like that made a lot of sense to me. So if you can do things like that, if you can come up with ways to cut through what's important, if you listen to these interviews of these guys on and men and women on these channels where they talk about fundamentals, they're often it almost always boils down to like three things, like 1 to 3 things that they focus on. The Bitcoin, bull is going to go, well, it's the Fed's printing money and Bitcoin is scarce. There's only 21 million, so they'll say things that, you know what I mean? Like they usually come down to like 1 to 3 things that they're really focusing on. And so it doesn't have to be that complex if you're going to be a fundamental trader. You often see that these people who base all of their fund, all of their trading, all of their efforts on just a handful of ideas. Yeah, I would try and shoot for that. Wherever you get those ideas, wherever they come from, whether it's books or from your back testing, something like that, so that you get to the point where you go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I think. This is what I believe. And so this is my approach. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think you have to look at the market too. Like you said, it's very simple. It's just basically supply and demand, right? So where can you get supply and demand information? I think it's a little harder in currencies. Stocks is a little bit easier, I think. And, just looking through that. And then going back to your point on the data, plotting the data out. I think last week I saw a indicator on TradingView, and they had the COT data, commitment of traders. And it doesn't quite work, but you can kind of look for that kind of stuff on the platforms and see if they have indicators already built in that could make your job a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the commitment of traders data, is that for the futures market in the pros? Is that from the CFTC? Yeah. I know that's tough because it doesn't come out. Does it come out weekly or something?
So, yeah,
or is it? Yeah. I think it's weekly. Yeah. So I don't think it's daily, but yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. You need to find your approach. This question from this trader, what should I pay attention to if I don't have a model of the world yet and I want to trade with fundamentals? It kind of suggests, reading between the lines, it's kind of saying that I need to have some overarching massive thesis about, like, you know what I mean? That's kind of, yeah. And I guess what we're saying is you don't necessarily need that, right? Like if you're going to be Peter Lynch or any talking head on Sky News or CNBC or Bloomberg or whatever, they've all kind of boiled it down. Like, and you can go on YouTube and find these people talking about, you can find plenty of them on there where they're talking about, like, the one I've been following lately, and we can link it up in the show notes, is Stansbury Research. Oh, yeah. So she does, Daniela Camboni. She does a really good job. Yeah, she brings in all these guys, all these people with totally different approaches. And it's amazing how different, like you can sit there in an hour or hour and a half or whatever, you can watch 3 completely different approaches. It's just like sitting down and watching the stock market channels, the business channels. It's the same thing, isn't it? Like, but she does a really good job of kind of like knowing where everyone's coming from and pulling out the important questions. But if you watch those, you'll just see the same thing. It's just they're focusing on 1 to 3 things, and that's really driving their decisions, and they're completely convinced of it. The good ones will actually they'll have alternative. They'll be like, well, I think this is what's happening, but if this happens, you know what I mean? You kind of have to be looking for evidence that doesn't support what you say and have more than one path. So, there's people who have confirmation bias who just focus in on their thing, and everything, all the evidence supports that. Mm-hmm. Then there's people who have false duality, and false duality is where they like, well, it's either this or this. But usually in life, it's not usually this or this. It's like this. There's a lot of options. So that's where you really want to be as a fundamental trader, I would say, is you want to be in that mindset where you have the path you're on, and you think this is where we're at, but you're looking, what would have to be true for me to be wrong? Mm-hmm. And you're looking for that, right? And it's not just 2 paths. It's not the false duality of this or this, but it's, okay, I think it's this path, and I'm going to look for things that could be true. And if they're true, then I'm wrong. And then I have to look at this path, and then I have to look at this path, and I have to, you just want to be more open to what could be happening, I guess, is, that open-mindedness is really important, I think, for people who are in this area, because they have to be able to switch quickly. Like when you're wrong, because a lot of these people, they don't use stop losses and stuff, right? They got major positions, they're position traders and stuff. And so they're like long haul traders holding on to these things. So you gotta at a certain point, you gotta go, okay, that's it. I'm done. Shifting, pulling my money out of Google now. Mm-hmm. I think Google has or whatever it is. So yeah, that's really important too, I think, is that flexibility.
Yeah, totally. And on Stansbury Research, I really found Rick Rule useful if people want to check that out. Kiyosaki's always good, obviously. Who else? Gerald Caliante. He's always entertaining.
Oh yeah, he's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a couple guys in there, I'm like, ooh, you're 80% wrong. I'm happy that she puts them on there because, they're 20% right also, so they might hit something. But any favorites of yours?
She calls them out too, like Max Kaiser. Max Kaiser, I saw that one the other day as well. I don't really have favorites. I guess what I like about those is they're relatively short. They're usually like under 30 minutes or under, right?
Yeah.
And also what I like about it is just getting exposed to the ideas, because I'm not really a fundamental trader per se, but I really like to see what other people are saying. And I can't deal with like the news channels, and I don't watch those. So like, YouTube is a good place to go. Like, and those in particular are really good because you get such a wide array of opinions. Like people just like gold. People will say, energies or cryptos or whatever. Like there's always these different approaches and the reasons why. And some people will say they'll have the same trades on or the same positions that they're looking at for completely different reasons. So, that's what makes up the market, isn't it? It's great. Yeah. So I like to watch them because I want to challenge, because inevitably I have my own ideas, even though I try to trade technically, but it's good, I think, to be exposed to the other side of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, I like that. I really like the other side.
The big one for me is like the Bitcoin maximalists, like Max Kaiser and who's that other guy, Sailor, and those guys. Because I don't think Bitcoin is like all that, but these guys seem to think that. So I like to listen to those guys in particular. They really challenge my opinions on that.
Yeah, totally. And like, who was the guy that died in Spain? He was the McAfee, right?
McAfee,
was it John McAfee?
Yeah,
he was kind of like Kaiser, where he was like, Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million this year, and that was like 2 years ago or whatever. I think it's just really good to see why people say the things they do. Like, what are they thinking? Why are they thinking this? Why do I agree or not agree, disagree? I just think it's really good for us to be exposed to those ideas, because I just think once you get locked into something, it's really difficult to get out. So if you're in that flexible mindset where you're in a path, you believe that's the right path, but you're open and you say, what would have to happen for me to be wrong? What would have to happen? Like, what do I do? Right. And then which path do I go down if I get these data coming in that confirm that I'm incorrect?
That's the big pitfall, right? Making those opinions part of your personality and your identity. And then once that becomes part of your identity, then you're going to defend that to the death.
Yeah. So the people that are able to disengage ideas, theses from person, you got to have that. And that's a rare skill, actually. It's a rare skill. We know from research as well, in people being able to coordinate theory and evidence. They usually just, when they say, well, why do you believe this theory? You're supposed to say, support it with evidence, right? Like that's science. And then people will just restate the theory in another way. And so that means you're not, you know what I mean? You're just not, you're not at that point. And you'll see this with people when you discuss things, they'll make it personal, or they'll instead of attacking your thesis, they will go with, or a group's thesis, may not be you personally, but another group that you're talking about, they'll attack them, just ad hominem attacks, which they don't have anything to do with the ideas. It's just that, oh, well, those people are stupid, or those people are dumb. Then you're not really dealing with anyone who's thinking about the ideas. Now they're just devolved into name calling. So
yeah, they're great.
You can't really have a conversation with them. Yeah. So,
something to be aware of. All right, thanks, Walter.
Yeah, thanks.
All information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and is not trading or investment advice.